sudden, devastating blow, and aiming to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleship force at the outset.
Every story of war is written twice, first in the orders given, and again in the consequences suffered. This is the story between those two moments, a story not just of a day, but of a decade, a story where the first shot was fired not with a bullet, but with an embargo, and the target wasn't just a fleet, but the very soul of a nation. Welcome. If you've ever wondered why Japan would risk everything to attack the most powerful nation on Earth, then you're in the right place. The textbook answer is expansion, but the real answer is a chilling chain of events, a series of decisions made by men in rooms under immense pressure, where every alternative seemed worse than the last. In this deep dive, we will cover the roots of the rivalry, how Japan's victory over Russia in 1905 set a dangerous precedent and put it on a collision course with the West. The China quagmire, how Japan's 1937 invasion became an unwinnable war, bleeding the empire dry and drawing the world's condemnation. The point of no return, the exact moment in July 1941 when diplomacy died and the countdown to war began. Yamamoto's forbidden plan, how a man who loved America was forced to design its destruction, and the shocking intelligence game surrounding his strategy. The 74-minute mistake, the diplomatic blunder that branded the attack as infamous and guaranteed America's unified fury. And the reckoning, how the very resource Japan sought to secure led to its paralyzation and utter defeat. Our story truly begins not in 1941, but in 1905. Japan's stunning naval victory over Imperial Russia announced its arrival as a modern world power, but it also planted a dangerous idea that a determined Asian nation could defeat a Western giant. This success, however, came with a looming anxiety. Japan was a powerhouse with an empty fuel tank. Its industry and ambitions relied on resources it did not possess. By the 1930s, this anxiety curdled into a radical ideology within the Japanese army, the concept of autarky, economic self-sufficiency. To be secure, Japan needed its own empire, its own resources, free from the whim of foreign powers. This ideology directly justified the 1931 takeover of Manchuria for its coal and iron, and, most fatefully, the full-scale invasion of China in 1937.
The situation in the Far East demands our attention and resolve. We must stand firm against aggression.
The invasion of China was a catastrophe, not just in its human toll, events like the rape of Nanking shocking the world, but strategically. The Chinese nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek refused to surrender. They traded space for time, drawing the Japanese army deeper into a vast, costly war of attrition. Japan was winning battles but losing the war, consuming its precious stockpiles of fuel and steel to fight an enemy that would not quit. In Washington, President Roosevelt watched. Initially bound by strong isolationist sentiment, he began to test the limits. In his 1937 quarantine speech, he condemned aggression and hinted at collective action. The U.S. began a moral embargo on aviation sales to Japan. The first tentative pressure was being applied. The war in Europe was Japan's opportunity and its trap. With France and the Netherlands defeated, their resource-rich colonies in Southeast Asia seemed vulnerable. Japan moved troops into northern French Indochina. The U.S. responded with its first major economic sanction, the 1940 Export Control Act, restricting aviation fuel and scrap iron. Each move and countermove escalated the tension. Then, in July 1941, Japan made its fatal move, occupying southern Indochina. This was no longer about China. This was a clear staging ground for an assault on British Malaya and the oil-rich Dutch East Indies. Roosevelt and Secretary of State Cordell Hull saw it as the final provocation. On July 26, 1941, Roosevelt dropped the hammer. All Japanese assets in the U.S. were frozen. a complete oil embargo began. For Japan's leaders, this was the economic equivalent of a declaration of war. Navy Chief of Staff Osami Nagano put it starkly to Emperor Hirohito. Our empire will finally be unable to move. Our navy would be able to operate for only 2 years. If we could remain quiet for a while, we would go bankrupt without a war. The clock was now ticking. They had, by their estimate, 18 months of fuel left. Enter the most tragic figure of this story, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, a gambler, a realist, and an admirer of America. He knew its industrial potential firsthand. He warned his government that Japan could not win a protracted war. He wrote, "I shall run wild for the first 6 months, but I have utterly no confidence for the second or third year." Yet, when ordered to plan, the brilliant strategist in him took over. If war was unavoidable, the only chance was a paralyzing first strike. His command to his planners was not just a tactic, it was a national strategy condensed into a single sentence. The attack on Pearl Harbor must be a sudden, devastating blow, aiming to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleship force at the outset. The goal, not to invade America, but to shatter its will to fight in the Pacific for a critical year, giving Japan time to secure an impregnable resource-rich empire. While diplomacy talked in Washington throughout the fall of 1941, the war machine was already in motion. Pilots trained obsessively. The revolutionary shallow water torpedo modification was perfected. The strike force assembled in secret at Hitokapu Bay. The final diplomatic note from the U.S., the Hull Note of November 26th, demanding Japan withdraw from all of China, was received in Tokyo as an ultimatum. Prime Minister Tojo called it an attempt to make Japan a slave to Anglo-Saxon interests. On December 1st, an imperial conference sanctioned the war. The orders were sent. Climb Mount Nitaka. The code to proceed. December 7th. The attack unfolds with shocking precision. For Japan, it's a tactical masterpiece. But within this success, 3 hidden failures seal their strategic fate. Failure 1, the third wave. After the second strike, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida radioed back, urging a third wave to destroy the fuel farms and dry docks. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the cautious fleet commander, faced a choice. His orders were to deliver a blow and preserve the fleet. Fearful of unseen American carriers, he gave the order, recover aircraft, prepare to withdraw. The repair facilities and 4.5 million barrels of oil, the lifeblood of the Pacific Fleet, were left untouched. Failure 2, the absent carriers. By sheer luck, the U.S. aircraft carriers Enterprise and Lexington were not in port. The primary weapons of the future Pacific War survived unscathed. Failure 3, the 74-minute mistake. In Washington, the order to deliver Japan's declaration of war before the attack was bungled. It arrived at the State Department over an hour after the bombing began. This turned a calculated act of war into what Roosevelt would forever call a sneak attack, unifying America in righteous fury. In Tokyo, they celebrated a victory, but Yamamoto was grim. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve," he reportedly said. He was right. America's war machine, which Japan had so fatally underestimated, ignited. The untouched docks of Pearl Harbor repaired ships in weeks, not years. The surviving carriers formed the nucleus of the strike force that destroyed 4 Japanese carriers at the Battle of Midway just 6 months later, the turning point of the Pacific War. And the ultimate, devastating irony, Japan went to war for oil. Yet by 1944, its fleet was often paralyzed in port for lack of fuel. Pilots were sent on suicide missions with minimal training because there was no fuel to train them. The embargo they went to war to break became absolute. So the real reason Japan attacked Pearl Harbor was not madness, nor pure evil. It was a series of rational decisions made within a trap of its own making, a trap of ideology, ambition, and resource hunger. They executed a brilliant tactical plan to solve a strategic dilemma. And in doing so, they triggered the precise chain of events that led to their total and catastrophic defeat. It was the greatest and most disastrous gamble in modern military history. What's the most shocking part of this story to you? Was there any way out for Japan in 1941? Let's discuss in the comments below. And if you want to dive deeper into the secret intelligence war behind Pearl Harbor, click here for our next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories of history.